Colleagues, it's been a long time. There's no question about it. We're all human beings. And it's been a long time because everybody has a good reason for it to be a long time. I'm not asking you to respect the reasons that your colleagues have. Far from it. That's what we do. We argue about policy. We argue about methods. We argue about principle. But you are all duly elected by your constituents. You're in one of the most honored places in Canada. You swore an oath to serve it. And that means that although you have no obligation to respect your colleague's position, you do have an obligation to respect your colleagues. That would be what is necessary to reflect to your constituents that you're dedicated to them. So I would just say that, like I said, we're human. I understand why it's a little bit heated at the moment with the many hours that we've gone on, but let's pay each other the respect that is due and continue on the debate and see how our debate continues to maybe dispose of this motion. I'll go back to Mr. Barrett, and I'm going to remind you of the speaking order again just before I give the floor to Mr. Barrett. Mr. Barrett, Mr. Angus, Mr. Sorbera, Mr. Fergus, Madam Goudreau. Mr. Barrett.
Well, thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. The unfortunate that the suspension came after the pylon. I must have hit a nerve there, talking about the connections between the conviction of an Ontario Liberal operative and the subject at hand with respect to destruction of documents. And I would note for my colleagues that there was hours of speaking by them without the interjection of a point of order or a heckle or any of the number of things that I didn't get 60 seconds into speaking before the pylon started. So I think it's important. I think that it's important to note that while I have disagreed heartily with much of what has been said by my Liberal colleagues, I've restrained my interventions on the relevance or lack thereof of what's been said today. So, Chair, I had concluded my remarks before we slipped into the gong show there. So I would ask that the committee members have the courage of their convictions and vote on the motion at hand. Thank you, Chair.
Are you asking me to canvass the members here to see if there's a willingness to go to a vote?
Indeed, sir.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. No, there's no consensus, Mr. Barrett. We're now on to Mr. Angus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank you for those profound words. It is very important to remember that people across this country are watching what is happening here, and I think that little exchange about underwear and who is to blame for saying things about underwear represented certainly a very low point in all the committees that I've been on, and I've been on some very fractious and bitter committees. But I think what worries me is that this is the first committee where the actual work of the committee, I believe, is being deliberately obstructed. We had 2 meetings on this issue back in the summer. We were about to get the Speaker Spotlight documents. The Prime Minister prorogued. That shut the work of this committee down for well over a month. And then we came back feeling that we were going to simply carry on and then finish the report, which I think we would have easily been finished by now. And we ran into one obstruction after another from government members. And I've reached out to try and broker a couple of compromises because I believe that it is our obligation to get these committees up and running, and we don't get everything we want. When we come into a committee hearing, we get sometimes compromises. And it's been said many times that a camel is a racehorse that was designed by a committee. And so we all want the racehorse, but we end up with sometimes a lopsided camel. But that is democracy. I am feeling now a little regretful that I reached out on those compromises, because I feel that whenever we agreed to change the motion to bring the Liberals on side, the playing field changed immediately. We were told again and again and again by the Liberals that it was outrageous that we bring in Madame Margaret Trudeau and Sacha Trudeau and how much money they got paid through their work with We. We were told that that was way over the line, that it was much more, it was a personal infringement, when the relevance to that issue was the fact that the We group had started to make huge payments to the Trudeau family after the Prime Minister became elected. And when they were trying to get that $900 million program, they were using photos of the Prime Minister's family. It put the Prime Minister into a conflict of interest under Section 5 of the Act. This was a very legitimate question. We told the Liberals we would have very, very strong processes in place to protect that the documentation, because the only thing we needed from the documentation was just to verify. Because we had been told false statements. We'd been told that absolutely the Trudeau family were not paid, and that wasn't true. Michelle Douglas from the We board testified that she'd asked straight up, were the Trudeau family being paid, and were told they weren't. So our committee had no reason to trust the words that we'd heard, but those documents should have simply verified it and we could have moved on. But the Liberals drew a hard line there. And so I reached out and said, okay, I'm not all that interested in how much the Trudeau family were being paid. We've identified that it was a significant amount of money, whether it was significantly more or of what we've been told, it doesn't really change the matter. And yet as soon as we made that agreement, suddenly then it was terribly unfair that we were asking about the Prime Minister's wife, even though the Liberals had identified in those negotiations that it was husband and wife, Prime Minister and wife, who were the people that should be looked at. As soon as we shortened the focus, they wanted to change it again. I found that very, very concerning. They came back and said they wanted us in their negotiations to look at the Frank Baylis deal. And yet we've been hearing nothing from the Liberals about how terrible it is that we're investigating this Frank Baylis deal. And they've been saying about using examples of other people from PPE companies who make donations. They shouldn't be dragged in because they make donations to a party or another party. It's not the fact that Mr. Baylis made donations. The fact is that he's a former member of Parliament. That's significant. Rahim Jafar was a former member of Parliament who went back in with a new business deal, and he was charged, I believe, and convicted because he was breaking the rules, because he was using his connections. We just need to verify that those connections were not improperly used. That's a pretty straightforward thing. A committee study does not presuppose guilt. We're looking into examples. But when the Liberals said that they didn't want us to look at Mr. Silver, but they wanted us to look at Mr. Baylis, I agreed. And then suddenly we were being told how terrible it was, and we were persecuting Mr. Baylis. So there's not a lot of trust for me right now with the Liberals, particularly as I sit and listen to them hour in, hour out, talk about anything other than getting this thing dealt with. In terms of the block amendment, I believed that the block amendment was out of order. And I said that at the time, that if the block voted against, if the block voted to shut down the request on the documents, then that matter was finished. However, the Speaker ruled that it was in order. I can disagree with the Speaker, or the Chair, the Chair. But once the decision's been made, then that's the decision that's been made by the committee, and we move on. We don't get to relitigate it as the Liberals are doing. We don't get to say, well, it's not democratic because we didn't like the result. What was democratic was that a vote was taken, the chair ruled it in order, so now we need to move on. But we're not getting to move on. The Liberals continue to put up all manner of obstructions, even today, with my colleague claiming that the Liberals on their side are actually concerned about the safety of Canadians. Meaning that us who are doing our work at this committee are not worried about the safety of Canadians. I find that to be very, very offensive. The sideshow that we just witnessed about whether or not Stanfield's underwear, found it in I don't know what year, was unfair or fair, or a drive-by smear about Liberals who wanted to talk about the underwear thing, shows to me that this is obstruction. I would give my Liberal colleagues two quotes. One is from March 7th, 2011. The quote is, "It has come to this, Mr. Speaker. In order for members of the House to do our jobs and to make informed decisions on behalf of Canadians, we need to pry scraps of relevant information out of the government's clenched fists and drag it out of them as they kick and scream at committee." Who said that? Justin Trudeau said that. And Justin Trudeau also said, Mr. Speaker, bits of blacked out documents with key information missing are not disclosure. Non-answers in the House are not disclosure. Rhetorical personal attacks are not disclosure. We need to get to the truth. So what has been hidden from us is the documents that were supposed to be released, many thousands of pages, many of those pages were blacked out. That's not acceptable. As far as the Speaker Spotlight documents, I was certainly surprised to learn that they didn't have all the documents, but I don't in any way assume that Speaker Spotlight was involved in any cover-up. I would like to have them come and explain what happened. But I do know the Speaker Spotlight has said there is other information. So let's just get that information and move on, because now the Liberals again tried to move out of order today is something they couldn't do, to limit the documents to 2013 when Speaker Spotlight said there is information preceding that. I don't think that this should be that big a deal. I think the documents should exonerate the Prime Minister and his wife. If their words are true, there shouldn't be a problem. So if we can get to this motion, we can bring Speaker Spotlight, because it is definitely not the work of our committee to insinuate that someone outside of a government has done something wrong. We just need to verify. Our role here is to come up with a report for the Canadian people to make their decision. So I'd ask my colleagues to stop arguing about underwear, to stop telling us about how every single PPE, mask, and glove has been appropriated right down to the penny, to stop coming up with reasons why they don't want to discuss this. We have a vote. We're 33 hours into the vote. The Liberals are wasting taxpayers' money. They are wasting our time, and they are making a mockery of a committee that has often been very fractious, often been very, very partisan and controversial, and at times very bitter. But that committee has always sat, it has always met, it has always voted, and it has always produced reports. So I'm telling my Liberal colleagues that time has come. So I'd like to ask Chair if we could test the room to see if we're ready for a vote, or if we're going to be stuck with more obstruction from the Liberals. So can we vote on this?
Thank you, Mr. Angus. I just look on the screen here to see if there's a willingness to go to a vote. No, there's no consent, Mr. Angus.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I'll cede the floor and I'll let the Liberals continue with their obstruction now, going 33, next will be 34 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. On speakers list is Mr. Sorbera, Mr. Fergus, Madam Goudreau. Mr. Sorbera. Mr. Sorbera, you're muted if you're speaking.
I apologize, chairs. Thank you for that. I just want to say good afternoon again to everyone. We've had a lot of deliberation today and substantive conversation, and I do want to just echo that the conversations do get heated. We sometimes represent different views, but at the end of the day, we represent Canadians, and I think we should always. I'm going to do that always, and I always try to do that. Those of you who know me and interacted with me over the number of years know that I try to consider myself not to be a really partisan MP, if I can use that term. I am represent and proud to be a Liberal since I was 15 years old when I first bought my membership. And became involved in politics. But nonetheless, I was voted by here to represent the wonderful constituents of Vaughan Woodbridge. and I represent them all, no matter who they voted for, no matter where they come from, and no matter what their views are. I have time for them all, and I love them all, and I try to do the best job that I can as the member of parliament for Vaughan Woodbridge here in this wonderful city of Vaughan. And I know the rest of my dear and honorable colleagues do the same in their constituencies. And I think that's something I hold dear to my heart, and I know that all my honorable colleagues hold dear to their hearts. So, with that, Chair, I do know my name has been bantered about several times today since the beginning of our sitting today at about 11 o'clock. I've been sort of surprised. I never realized I was that popular, nor was it neither that popular nor that important. But it seems that I've become pretty popular today in some testimony to my colleagues. And I thank you for thinking of me. It's always very nice to be thought of, and it's always nice to be mentioned of. And sometimes, if you wish to comment on my past comments or my past words, feel free to do so. We are on committee. We are allowed to chat and represent our views, and that's great. One thing I promise to do, Chair, as a committee member on ethics, and as long as I get to serve in this committee, is be respectful to my colleagues, and I always try to do that. And if I haven't been respectful, I'll be the first one to apologize, and so forth. So that's my stick. Those are my comments, Chair. And as we're going here, I do want to back up, because Mr. Angus, in his early deliberations this morning, was very free flowing, had a lot of commentary to say, and I always listen intently to Mr. Angus. I do. I find him very wise. I do want to say, Charlie, I know you posted, MP Angus, you posted the picture from Ortona, where we were last year during this week, and I saw some of your Instagram posts, and they were very touching and reminded me of our trip last year. It is not, I'm saying this because it was Remembrance Day week, not for anything other. Don't read into it, please. But Mr. Angus did comment about finance and a number of proceedings and his interpretation of things. So, Mr. Chair, you gave Mr. Angus quite the breadth of room and yourself. And I think Mr. Angus mentioned recently, he was disappointed in potentially thinking that we didn't, live up, or we on the government side didn't live up to certain obligations, not obligations, but certain discussions that may have transpired. And I always frame those discussions as there should be the private discussions between MPs. We always chat amongst ourselves. A lot of us are friends amongst ourselves. I know on our trip, Mr. MP Angus, the block member that was with us, Mr. Dusoleil, who I still keep in contact with, who I think of as a friend and someone I just smile when we chat and so forth. So we have those things. I think we need to be respectful of those conversations. But going back to Charlie's motion, to MP Angus's motion from October 22nd, 2020, where we had agreed upon to remove, I believe it was Mr. Fergus's amendment, which was passed in good spirit, in cooperation with the honourable member from the Democratic Party, where we removed the bullet point A on the examination into MCAP and Rob Silver's involvement with the Qs and the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. And I will slow down for the interpreters. I apologize. Excusez-moi, Madame Goudreau, if I'm speaking too fast. And where we also removed D on examination of the use of partisan resources and processes in the appointment of federal judges that may have constituted violations of the privacy rights of nominees, and then at the committee. With that amendment motion, Mr. MP Angus, that amended motion, your amended motion with Mr. Fergus's help, and I wish to thank the New Democratic member for what I would say, recognizing the fact that, going after someone's mother was wrong, going after someone's brother was wrong. And I want to recognize it, because MP Angus he recognized that. And I thought, on a personal basis, which I argued here in my riding office in Vaughan, that was an incorrect thing to do by the official opposition. I thought that was an overreach of a huge amount, and I fundamentally argued at that time, Chair, that it was fundamentally wrong, shameful, embarrassing to go after the Prime Minister's mother. And I'm glad that MP Angus helped us get to a point where we can move. Now, I do agree. I do agree with MP Angus's on his interpretation of the amendment that then Madame Goudreau put forward, and that was voted on by the commitment. I, Chair, in my procedural understanding, understood to be that portion of the amendment that Madame Goudreau put forward substantively, if not almost exactly similar in intent of the motion that was voted upon and that was lost, that was defeated. So to me, that amendment was out of order. Now, I'm not the chair, I'm not the clerk, I'm not the entire committee. So that was my interpretation. It was, again, as I described it, when an individual goes golfing, it was a mulligan. It was a do-over. But I also understand and appreciate very much MP Angus's comment, who you just mentioned recently, and please, MP Angus, if I've misquoted you, please correct me. No, that he commented, I believed that Madame Goudreau's amendment was out of order, but because the ruling was that the amendment was not out of order, ruled by the chair, because it was not out of, then he voted for the amendment to add to his amended motion, where the amended motion was with Mr. Fergus's amendment. So we had a motion which was amended once, then amended twice. And that has become a sticking point, because I really feel that we had received, that we had seen some movement and some goodwill. And I would like to move on to doing whichever study the committee adopts to do under your leadership, Chair. And Chair, thank you for your patience, your ton penchance. It's admirable, and you called a 10-minute break to suspend and calm things down, which I thought was very timely, Chair. And I thank you for doing that and your wisdom. Thank you very much, Chair. I think that was appreciative, because frankly, I'm attacked by some of the MPs on Twitter every time I leave this ethics committee. I see it on Twitter. I see Mr. Warkentin's tweet. I read them, and I say, oh, wow, you're attacking me today, Mr. Warkentin. But what I know is that I'm going to keep doing the great work that my constituents ask of me, and I'm going to still visit my seniors when I'm able to, and I'm going to make sure that income supports that people that continue to be impacted by COVID-19 are going to receive. And that's what our government's going to do. So if the opposite side wishes to attack me on Twitter, and it's all out there, Mr. Chair, if the opposite side just wishes to attack me, and that's the bar, and that's the level they're going to stoop to, they can continue doing that. For all the power, please do. Because you know what? My constituents and Canadians know that we are in a pandemic, and our government's going to work with the provincial governments across the country to continue to help Canadians out. So while Mr. MP Warkentin wishes to attack and play that negativity, allow him to do that. Please do so, because it's not constructive. Half the things that you've been put out have been false, and actually, it's sort of beneath us, sort of beneath why we're elected as MPs. And that's my opinion, Mr. Warkentin.